Mr. Civ Div, a familiar face back on the channel.
Yeah.
How are you, man?
Doing good, man. Just get back to the States. I just left Ukraine about a month ago.
Yeah.
Doing good.
And how's everything going over there? How are you healing up after having a slight drone incident?
You remembered? Yeah, no, it's still healing up. I'm just stretching it a lot, trying to regain the mobility because it cut right on the joint. But everything's good. Everything's good.
That's good, man. And how are you going? How's life? How's work? How's everything?
Well, you're not going to believe it. Today's my birthday, actually. I'm 28.
Oh, shit.
Yeah.
28. Man, happy birthday. Well, I'm happy to grab you on your birthday and take you away from everything to do this.
I appreciate it, dude. I got a cake for right after we get done with the call. So I'm gonna eat this shit up. Right there. Chocolate. Yeah.
Damn.
Excited.
Man, I'm stoked for you, man. Look, the reason you and I talk back and forth all the time, but the reason I really wanted to talk to you today is, of course, your experience in Syria and what's going on. And I've seen you also jump on and say, hey guys, like it's sort of the enemy of your enemy may not actually sort of be your friend in this. Can you just give, I guess, a quick brief for those, because I guess most people know you from Ukraine. A lot of your found fame is from there. Can you just give us a quick rundown of your experience on that side of the world?
Yeah, sure. So I spent a total of about 2 years in Syria and Iraq with the Kurdish forces. So if people are looking at the Syria Live map right now, the SDF or the YPG, those are the groups I was with, or ones affiliated with that. And yeah, right now, like over there, we'll talk about some more, but a little brief summary. It's like there's mainly 3 factions right now in Syria that are fighting. So there's the Assad regime backed by the Russians. We have the Al-Qaeda and ISIS, HTS. I'm very biased with this, so but it's very clear. You can see the patches and everything. ISIS and Al-Qaeda, SNA, Free Syrian Army. They're backed by the Turks, and they're all on the same side. And then we have the SDF, YPG, backed by the American forces. And those are the 3 ones that are fighting each other right now. And it was all started by the SNA. We'll talk about it, but the SNA, FSA, HTS, the Turkish-backed rebels, they were the ones who just kind of broke out from Idlib and just kind of started a bunch of offensives into the Kurdish enclaves as well as the regime cities.
Yeah. And you can tell straight away, like I know you have lived and breathed this and been there, walked the walk. You can see how though incredibly complex it can be for people looking upon this and going, wait, who's who? Who's who in this zoo? Like it is a wild mix of everything. And I think where people also then get confused, and I myself, is who's backing who? Because you've got Turkey backing areas, you've got the US backing areas, you've got Russia backing, and then you've got like crossover of this as well.
Yeah. And, like I said, the HTS, Free Syrian Army, SNA, they're these rebel forces. They're backed by the Turks. And it's not just like backed. It's like reportedly last night, they shot down a jet, or like a Russian or Syrian jet. So they're getting man pads. They're getting this really good gear from the Turkish military. As well as even I've seen strikes earlier on when they did this this offensive. There was artillery pieces from the Turks, the Turkish military, firing into the regime-held areas and stuff. So yeah, it's basically what I'm seeing right now is it seems like it's the Turks kind of calling the bluff and saying like, Russians, you are focusing on Ukraine. You're not able to go and help the Syrians right now. We can see they probably have intelligence working, and they think that now is a great time that the Russians are bogged down there. Let's get the rebels all built up and everything, and just send them out there and do a big offensive. And it seems to be working, which is very strange.
Yeah, man. You look at the maps, and I know only this afternoon it was 36 to 40 kilometers of ground had been made.
Yeah. It's not like what we're seeing in Ukraine right now. It's like a big deal. Yeah.
Oh no, Ukraine. A 1 kilometer is a massive advancement, and we've seen this in a day.
Yeah. I never saw this coming. I don't think any of us did.
No, well, the other side definitely didn't. We've seen relatively like little resistance.
Yeah, it's a little disheartening, but I mean, it's still very early on, so we'll see
Yeah.
what happens.
Yeah, I do think with that amount of ground made, when we do see a counter, it could very easily be very overextended and no supply lines on that initial run.
Yeah, and I think you're looking at the maps. You obviously look at maps all day as well. It seems like they just kind of drove straight to the cities, like Hama or I think Homs is the other one, or maybe I got it mixed up. But they're just like driving straight into it. It might just be a raid of some sort. But it doesn't seem like they're expanding control. It's just like they're just driving down the highway, going to these cities and causing havoc.
Yeah, and it's a bit of a hard thing with Turkey backing this, because I don't really agree with this idea that you can sort of switch on and off your NATO membership. I don't want to get too political in this, but Turkey and Russia have this I can't remember the exact term, but it's like, if fighting within Syria, an attack on Turkish forces and forces here won't be an attack against NATO. But then people are like yourself, you say, well, they might be firing artillery in, and I'm like, Turkey shouldn't get to decide, like, oh no, this operation is not NATO and this one is. My opinion is like, no. If you're part of the alliance, you're part of the alliance, or else it discredits the whole thing. Like, if a bomb now goes into Turkey, can they go, oh, well, we're NATO for that, but we're not NATO for all this other stuff that you're doing? You represent the cause. It's like when you're in uniform, like when you were back in uniform. If you do anything, whether you're on the piss in civilian clothing, through it or whatever, it's like you're representing that service the whole time. You can't step in and out.
Yeah, that's exactly how I feel as well. I am done with Turkey. I've been done with them for a while, but I am. It's crazy what they're doing, and you put it perfectly. Yeah, they're it's gross, dude. It's gross, it's slimy.
Yeah, it is. It is such a weird thing for a country like Turkey to sort of step out of, because NATO at the end of the day is a US alliance. US is 80% of the firepower within the alliance, and they step sort of out and in of this. It is a really, really interesting piece that is occurring.
Yeah, man. And I also want to mention, we'll get into this. We're kind of going everywhere, but like when we talk about the Turks, ISIS, Al Qaeda, they're supporting them. Like early on in the war, like back when it started 12 years ago or something like that, the Syrian civil war, it was the Free Syrian Army, and it was all these factions. They're fighting against the regime, and nobody really saw a connection with Al Qaeda and stuff. But I want people to know that the last 2 or 3 ISIS commanders, if they remember when Baghdadi was killed under Trump, or like when they remember these like actions killing top ISIS leaders, they were like 500 meters away from the Turkish border, 3 kilometers. They were right there in this area held by the rebels. Like, this is ISIS. It is ISIS. And Turkey knows that they're 500 meters away from the border. They cross to and from all the time. They're getting ISIS fighters from Turkey. They're getting all this stuff. And obviously NATO fights ISIS. So it's a little weird to go and see this. Yeah. It's gross, man.
Oh man, it is absolute chaos over there at the moment. It's really funny. I won't name who he is, but there's someone who I know who is vehemently pro, like everything from humanitarian and all this, like super pro Ukraine. Good on him. But he said that Russia is he's going to be the bad guy in history in Ukraine, and he said, but in Syria, it's going to look vastly different in decades when we look back, that we may look back and go, hey, look, they're not the good guys, but some of our allies supported factions which are insane as well. And I thought that was a really interesting way he can look out and sort of critique it from that they're backing this regime, which is horrible. And this is something that I spoke about briefly today, was the enemy of your enemy. It's not just your friend automatically in this. And I think for personally, I've been actually disappointed in a lot of very smart people by like, hang on. If you're supporting this, you're supporting it's a bit like we say with Turkey. If you want to be part of this, you're part of all of this. And people then selling like, I don't know, it's a couple of ISIS flags. And they're like, a couple's probably too many here, bro.
Yeah.
Or it's like, well, what about the chlorine attacks back in the day? Like, it's horrible shit, man.
Yeah. And it's all like, controversial. Like, who did it? Was it the rebels who were trying to bring in this international attention by starting chemical things, or was it the Assad regime? I'm not sure. I could know more about the regime. I know some, surprisingly, I know some friends who support them a lot, and I don't like Turkey. That's the big one for me. And then there's the regime backed by the Russians. I'm cool with the SDF. I like the SDF. I think that they're doing something good, but it's still very, very confusing, just like it was 12 years ago. There's a lot of moving parts. That's for sure.
Man, I know it's all up in the air, but where would you see this occurring over the next coming while?
Ooh, I think what I'm looking at right now is Aleppo. Obviously, it's the biggest city in Syria, and that's the one that everybody's probably seen on the news. And for people who don't know, Sheikh Maksud, which is in the northern part of Aleppo, it's this neighborhood, and kind of a big neighborhood, a couple kilometers. And it is SDF held. It's been under regime control, but it's had a lot of SDF working in there. And then north of that is Tel Rifat, which is this enclave that the SDF kept after the Afrin operation Turkey did in 2018. A lot of mumbo jumbo, but I'm hoping. I think what we're going to be looking at for the next couple of days, maybe weeks, maybe who knows longer, is, are the HTS ISIS rebels, are they going to be able to take that enclave, take Sheikh Maksud, take a bunch of YPG prisoners, as well as Tal Rifat? And if they can, then we wouldn't have any enclave there, and that would change things quite a bit in the Syrian civil war. So that's what I'm worried about, is Aleppo right now, and that whole area.
Yeah, well, I know a fair chunk of Aleppo has come under control of the rebel forces.
Yeah, it seems like the regime, backed by the Russians, they up and ran. I mean, like, before, when I would look at Instagram, like Streaking Delilah or Streaking Dalila, love their channel, or love their page, and they post a lot of stuff about the Syrian army, and it's very interesting. And it seemed like there was a lot of diehard Syrian army guys who love Bashar al-Assad. They love the Russian forces, everything, but they're not dying hard. They're upping and going, and they're going all the way to Damascus, and there's even fighting in Damascus now, way down south in the capital. It doesn't seem like it seems like the conscript army that the Syrian army made, it didn't really amount to much. I think that's something I'm seeing.
Yeah, you know what this looks exactly like to me? It looks exactly like when the coalition pulled out of Afghanistan.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I mean, you were in Afghanistan. Yeah.
It looks. I wasn't there when Afghan fell, when Kabul fell, but it's looking exactly like that. That you had these strongholds that that you thought would hold for a long time, just fall straight away, and then you had, and then the battle, and you have Kabul. And if we overlay, say Kabul is like the equivalent of Damascus, you're like, no, it would take so long. And there's these diehard supporters of change that are going to sit here and defend this, and it's just not. Now I know we're dealing with very different factions in some areas, at least, but it feels to me very similar. I think that Russia may be having its Afghanistan, Mark II maybe, or of similar to the coalition had there, of training up these forces, doing this and that, for it just to sort of walk away. I think it's going to be very interesting to see if Assad completely collapse, the regime collapse, what happens then?
And it certainly looks, it's going in that direction of a collapse. It really is. We're seeing, even I saw, like, on Syria Live Map, I saw that they were writing that the Republican Army, I guess it's like some sort of faction of the Syrian army, as well as some other division of the Syrian army, are now clashing. It seems like there's like maybe even potential coups, and I don't know. We'll have to see. But yeah, you're very right. I forgot about that with the Afghanistan withdrawal. It was like, as the coalition were going, it was just base after base, which was like, I'm done. Very similar, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm seeing groups of 50 troops being taken here and 10 T-72s and this and that. I'm like, holy shit, this is crazy, the amount of ground. But I do still think there's a lot of supporting and cheering, and I'm like, I'll give it a bit, because you can see these sort of thunder run, and that only works if you can then maintain a supply line and not get cut off. And if the regime forces, if they sort of kick their ass into gear, you might be in a bit of strife. As well as the Russian airstrikes, people are comparing a lot of this to Ukraine, and it's a very different situation with the ability to counter that air. There's agreements between Turkey and Russia. So we have seen in 2015 a Russian plane be taken down, but it's unlikely we'll see Turkey fire upon Russian Sukhoi aircraft, and not having the absolute pinnacle of air defense, which say Ukraine has. You will see the effect on target be far greater, because they can basically fly a plane over the top and just drop a bomb. So we will see a hell of a lot of that.
Yeah, I've seen a couple of videos coming out of airstrikes and stuff, and it's certainly doing the job. It's doing the trick. But I mean, we'll see. I mean, they don't have that. It looks like they have man pads. So I'm curious to know if that's going to affect the Russians' control of the air. I don't know what jet was shot down. It was reportedly, I don't know if it was like Syrian army pilot or Russian, but
so there was footage of a dogfight put up between a Turkish F4 and an Iranian F14.
Really?
Kraken. That was I read it about 20 times, and there's footage of this it's sort of locked into like a double what do they call it? Like a double arc, and people were like, "This is like a museum dogfight." But yeah, there was footage of this. I'm not sure if any of it went down, but crazy footage, man.
Holy shit! I didn't even know that. I didn't see that at all. That's it's like a museum. Yeah, you're right. It's there's a lot of old hardware out there that we're going to be seeing put to use now.
Oh shit, yeah, man.
But from like actual countries, not just the proxies, but like the actual Air Force battling. That's a little concerning.
That's at least whatever the media page who shared it that I saw was quoting, and that's just I just think this is another arm of this proxy war beginning all around the world. Like my opinion is that great states are it's too expensive, and everyone's too powerful to fight each other. So you're just going to end up with all these proxy fights going on because no one actually wants to fire the bomb. And it's like, oh, we'll fund this or we'll fund that. And I was doing some just researching yesterday, and people like the amount of people with their fingers in the pie in Syria is just insane. And of course, the people that suffer are just the civilians.
Yeah, it's true. And it came to mind as well, Al Tanf. I don't know if people know where that is. It's in the southern part of Syria. That's where the American base is. Like the Americans still hold like a pretty big chunk of the desert in Syria. And I'm interested to know, like, is this new conflict gonna spread over there? Or are we gonna see like American forces having to do some actions? Kind of curious. I wonder. But yeah, I mean, like, there's a ton of countries involved in this, even Iran. That there's so many countries that have reasons to be in Syria, and hopefully this is hopefully it dies down, because the people of Syria have been through a lot. They've been through a lot. I've got friends in Sheikh Maksud. I've got friends in YPG right now, international and on the ground. I've got people who had done the YPG stuff. They call it a day, Syrians, and they're just trying to live with their families. And it's really devastated. The food, there's always problems with food because Turkey likes to bomb the farm fields. There's problems with the currency, obviously. There's so many problems that like a new conflict is just not gonna help.
No, it doesn't help anyone. You're of course very anti Turkey by what you've seen personally and what you're seeing. How does that affect, I guess, your overall outlook into NATO as a whole?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I've thought about it a lot, and I've always stuck with my guns. Even in the early days of the Ukrainian war when I was there, with Turkey giving Bayraktars to Ukraine, and I knew right from the get-go, and I think I was posting on Instagram as well, like, do not trust the Turks. They're going to be turning their backs. They're going to be like, they're going to do some economic thing. They're going to, skip sanctions. They're going to do whatever they want. They have a very special place in NATO and a very special place in the world where they're in between Europe and the Middle East. And because they feel like they can do whatever they want. And I don't trust them. They're the Turkish government. Erdogan has been in power probably longer than Putin. I mean, this guy is a total dictator. In my opinion, very opinionated, but holy crap, I don't think anybody can look at Turkey and be like, oh yeah, they're a good part of this, part of NATO, good part of anything. They're always causing problems. Finland and Sweden, they want to join. They're like, oh well, you have to call the YPG terrorists. You have to call the YPG terrorists, and you have to extradite them back to Turkey or like do whatever. But then they're allowed to fund ISIS and have Baghdadi 500 meters away from the Turkish border. I could get livid about this, but like, yeah, not to be trusted. Yeah.
Dude, I even saw when, more recently, within the past couple of years, when Erdogan and Putin were, having a meeting, and even like a lot of like the pro-Russian accounts were like, you guys need to be very careful with Erdogan. And it's funny seeing like sort of a lot of people being like, be careful with this. Don't trust this. Yeah, I think it really could. I think a lot of this could really bring where Turkey's real alliance actually sits in the alliance. There's no way they're ever going to leave or be booted. There's not even really frameworking for this. But it definitely puts a lot of strain on this. And like I've said, I believe that we are in the second Cold War at the moment. That's personally what I believe. And the biggest win is if something like NATO loses its loses the alliance itself. Like if in between the cracks start forming and you can't trust this, and you can't trust this, and that starts falling apart, because that's where the strength is sort of that strength in numbers idea. And this does strain a lot of those relationships at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, even despite that, especially with Trump coming in the presidency, he was the first one to abandon the Kurds. General Mattis left because of that, Secretary of Defense. I think even despite everything, I think NATO will do their best to keep Turkey in the alliance, for better and worse. Obviously they're in a very strategic area. They got part of everything. They got part of the entire world. Their fingers are everywhere. Very important to have in NATO, unfortunately. And yeah, I'm not sure if they'd be kicked out or if we would start anything, be like, oh, why are you supporting ISIS? Why are you supporting this? I think it'll be a lot of the status quo of just like proxies. And it's a little weird to have American proxies fighting Turkish proxies while both being NATO, but I think it'll be a continuation of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's very worrying though. It's very worrying.
Have you spoken to any of your friends who are currently in Syria?
So I try to reach out to them right about now, but they're a little busy. So I'm gonna try and reach out to them again whenever they get time to go and respond. It's a little freaky, and I'm also really worried. So this is the Idlib, Aleppo area, maybe Damascus. It's kind of the western part of Syria, but obviously the eastern part is held by the SDF. And I'm really worried about that area. That area has seen a lot of action here and there the last couple of years. And given this advance, it could just be the start. We see Manbij as well, which is across the Euphrates River. If anybody's listening right now, maybe pull up Syria live map, you'll see what I mean. But Manbij, that's a very risky area for the SDF. They could lose that during this incursion. As well as Shengal in Iraq. I mean, like that's also YPG SDF, not YPG SDF, it's YBS, but it's all the sort of same affiliation. That also worries me. Turkey's been doing airstrikes on all these areas, all across the yellow that you see on the map, and I'm worried about what else the Turks might have in mind, using their proxy forces. Yeah.
Oh man, it is absolutely wild, and there's rumors that Iraq's going to start deploying special forces troops into Syria as well, who are incredibly experienced. People don't actually realize the amount of training and equipment that some of those Iraqis have also.
Yep. Yeah, and they're U.S. backed as well, so maybe they could come to the help of the YPG, even though they're not huge fans of them. I'm thinking as well, like we touched on Aleppo, but the current update with it is especially worrying. Tel Rifat and Sheikh Maksud in that northern area of Aleppo is surrounded now. During the first couple of days, the YPG was able to get a humanitarian corridor. They fought through the regime lines and fought through all the lines connected to Manbij, and they were flowing civilians out, probably some fighters as well. Not sure if they were going in or out, but I'm pretty worried about that because now that whole area is surrounded, and that is a big area with a lot of military infrastructure for the SDF in Tel Rifat, North Aleppo. So I'm a little worried about that. That's one thing I'm keeping my eye on. I just want to mention that because it looks like they're surrounded right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what is your feeling towards, I guess, the Russian-backed forces in Syria?
Yeah, I mean, like, my opinion is at the early stage, even before the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, they were kind of helping the SDF. The regime and the SDF worked together quite well. They know that they can't be a separate part of Syria. The SDF knows that, so they were actually working with the regime and working with the Russians to go and keep Turkey away and kind of keep the peace and stuff. So they were working together pretty well. But I think that they did that because Trump had gotten out of Syria. He let the Turks invade, and the SDF had to go and find a partner that would be able to support them in the ventures and what they wanted to get done. But now with the war in Ukraine, I mean, we see in Armenia, we see in Syria now, we see, I think there's another place. Oh yeah, Libya, like all sorts of places. We're seeing that maybe siding with the Russians right now, probably not a good idea. They're bogged down. I don't know. I'm very opinionated. I know your audience is a little different than mine, so I don't want to get into it. But like, I don't think that being with the Russians would be a good idea in the future for the SDF or the countries around. Neither the American forces. Can't say that either. Don't really know, but I'm not a huge fan. But I did respect back in 2019 when they did try and help the SDF in a bit. I do respect that part, but that part alone.
Yeah. Oh man, it's good to be able to, have a sort of a open enough mind to be like, hey, look, there's different time frames, different things happen at different times.
Yeah.
And one thing with this series, I think we'll look back and go, fucking hell, like everyone was wrong on this, and it's such an absolute mess.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's very different than the Ukrainian war. I think we can say like, okay, it doesn't matter. This is a completely different war with different things in play. I think if anything, everybody can look at their eyes at Turkey and be like, shame on you. Shame on you for funding these ISIS fighters and Al-Qaeda and getting them all riled up and giving them man pads and everything, and just creating another conflict out there. There was quite a bit of status quo. The lines were held for quite a while. So the only person that I really look at in this conflict right now as the one person, you guys already know, the one person, the one group, one country that should be put to shame right now, it's Turkey. It shouldn't be the American forces, it shouldn't be the Russians, although all of them have done terrible things in Syria and good things, but it's Turkey who's starting this. That's fine. Yeah.
I was actually thinking that whenever the Ukrainian war ends at some point, and however that ends, we have seen both the US say that there needs to be some level of relationship with Russia at some level, and Russia even says back there needs to be some relationship between themselves and America. And I've said to people, relationship doesn't mean you're there holding hands singing Kumbaya. Relationship means there's some level of diplomatic talks down the line between two very powerful nuclear armed states. And I've said to people, like, it doesn't matter what side you're on, eventually there's going to be some level of communication there. I did think, and this is maybe my optimistic mind, that I think, shit, maybe in a decade, I don't know when, potentially Syria may be the location for almost like a reconciliation project, and be like, look, we need a heap of forces just to clear out ISIS out of here. And maybe that can be some level of, at least, hey, look, we all have a similar-ish goal here. You have different areas of aspect of which we are pushing, but the common goal should be the eradication of ISIS here, and then sort out whatever potentially down the line that could be something, because of course all these countries are looking to have influence here.
Yeah, no, I see what you mean. I think that the only problem that I can see there is that there's like 3 factions in Syria right now, and there's got to be like 2 at least, at the most. I think that one of them needs to be kicked out. Either it's ISIS, and when I talk about like ISIS, people are, what? There's no ISIS. They take off the patch and they put on an FSA patch. This is well known. That's what's happening. But I think if that's going to happen, there needs to be either Turkey kicked out with their rebels, kicked out, go back to Turkey, get out of here. And then the Russians and Americans might be able to deal something in Syria, or in a different arrangement. I think that might be necessary, because 3 factions holding a significant amount of ground in Syria with all 3 different ideas of what they want Syria to look like. I don't know if that would be able to. I don't think reconciliation could happen.
Yeah.
I'm sure you could agree. But I think yeah, one group needs to go, and I hope that whatever group that is, maybe the other 2 sides can help kick them out, and yeah, maybe that could be some cooperation involved with that, which could be cool, you know. Yeah.
How do you see that this could impact, of course, what you and I are known most for in Ukraine? How do you think this could impact that, if at all?
I'm not sure. I haven't really thought about that. I think I don't think much. It could be something like Afghanistan. Like there's a big thought in the world that our Afghanistan withdrawal actually encouraged China to look at Taiwan and Russia to look at Ukraine. You know, so maybe something like that could happen. We're seeing obviously the Russian-held territory being absolutely taken in Syria right now. Maybe we would get enjoyment out of that, and we could fund Ukraine. Be like, oh, Russia can't support their proxies around the world. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think geopolitically it's going to have more of an effect than it is militarily. I've seen a lot of people pointing militarily, saying, oh, because there's 2 sides of the coin here. And I touched on both today. I said one side is saying that Russia's going to redeploy a lot of forces from Ukraine into Syria to try and protect their what they've been working on for years here, and the regime. And the others, and they're saying, well, that's going to really greatly limit their offensive capability in Ukraine. And the other side of the coin is saying, if Assad were to collapse, a lot of those resources that Russia has allocated into Syria then become available inside Ukraine. And that's sort of the 2 sides of the coin. But the amount of resources realistically isn't that much. When we look at the amount of resources Russia has online to fight in Ukraine, that in Syria you're talking about 20 to 30 aircraft at any one point in time. It's a lot, but it's not a game-changing tidal wave amount of equipment or men. And people have pointed the other way, saying, yeah, look, Russia could get bogged down here, which could occur, but I'm not sure if they would step away before that happened or not.
That's interesting. That's a good point as well. I don't think that I don't think Russia could bring troops into there. Personally, I don't think a significant amount to go and be able to fight back and keep it. I think Syria might be left on their own for now. I think they might be a little shit out of luck, to be honest. But yeah, that's a good point. There could be implications, even militarily, in Ukraine. There could be. But I think geopolitically, that'd be the big one. But even Libya as well. Like there's stuff everywhere that Russia is kind of dropping the ball right now, just because they're a little bogged down. We'll see what. I think this is just the start, though. Like we're seeing wars pop up everywhere the last couple of years, and I think that we're going to see a continuation of this.
Well, once war enters, protracted stalemate sort of area, countries start looking at other theaters to wage the war. And I see this as no differently to the claimed, I guess, Ukrainian special forces operating in areas like Sudan against other Russian factions or Russian PMCs. And it's very common in through history as well of, a protracted war. Once things slow down, becomes positional, that some of these elements move into other theaters and attack on other theaters around the globe. And I think we're going to see a lot more of that. As we do know, Russia wages a lot of Russia's hybrid warfare campaign is much more blatant than ones the West runs. The West is very covert with, it's hybrid warfare, unrestricted warfare, where Russia and China, particularly Russia, have just far more sort of just hit it with a slap. You can notice it straight away. And it is very interesting to see where they've got fingers in pies and where it's working and where it's not working, and where some of the some factions will be more attracted to the Russian way of doing things compared to maybe the Western way. And Mali's a good example of this.
Yes,
It's let's incorporate, this democracy and this and that, and then Russia step in and be like, we'll just which warlord do you want killed? Oh, that one. Okay, we'll just go and fucking do this through a PMC subsidiary. It doesn't link back to the Kremlin, even if we know where that money supply is coming.
Yeah,
but that can be very, very attractive to some of these groups also.
Yeah, no, very true. It's Africa is a whole other thing. There's Myanmar. There's a lot of stuff that can kick off, especially when people are seeing the chess pieces move and they see Syria starting to fall. And okay, what does this mean? And yeah, there's still a lot of posturing going on in the world, like in Asia, Africa, absolutely everywhere. A lot of posturing, a lot of stuff that we're gonna see. Yeah, this is just. We thought we were at the start of it, like in Ukraine. We thought maybe at the end, Africa, but it's continuing, and we're gonna see posturing for the next decade, I think, and a lot of weird conflicts popping up. Personally.
Oh yeah, man. And look, on a personal thing, how's everything going in Ukraine? How's all that for yourself?
Yeah, all's good. I left about a month ago. Just enjoying my time. Haven't seen the family in 2 years, so it was about time. The holidays. But yeah, Ukraine's going well. My team, they're out there doing drone ops. They're doing good work. In my opinion, I'm pro-Ukrainian. But I hope to go back there soon. We'll see. I was also looking at Taiwan to go and travel to and try and get a better understanding of that conflict as well. But I'm very. It's a little weird to be back in the States after being in Ukraine. But I look forward to getting back there. Look forward to it. I miss my friends already. So.
I bet. And how's the general feeling in Ukraine? Because it's easy to look at the maps. It's easy to look at the maps to sit here in Australia and go, look, things really aren't looking good, and read articles from everyone at the moment, from even CNN to The Economist to Politico to Guardian, and really be like, oh shit, things really are taking a turn. What is your, I guess, take on that?
Yeah, no, obviously we can all see the maps. We know the lines are starting to move a little bit. Personally, I like the soldiers that I talk to, and this isn't propaganda. You can take it as I'm biased, okay? But when I talk to my unit, at least, okay, my units and other friends that I have in other units, still the same morale that they had since day one. They're there till the end. They're there to go and fight, and they've had a lot of friends lost. A lot like what we saw in Afghanistan, Iraq. Like when you kill one, you raise up two. Like two come back to go and get their revenge and stuff. And that was certainly my case this time around going to Ukraine. Had a little bit of a bloodlust after some friends were killed. But yeah, people's morale is good. We're just keeping on the fight. It's slow and steady. It's not like it's not like the Syrian regime force is just like, oh no, let's go away. It's different, like people really have their hearts in it still. And I think that's clear. Despite the ground that's being lost here and there in Ukraine, I think people can tell, okay, they're not just giving up. They're still very, very ideologically motivated people to go and that are nationalistic of Ukraine, that are fighting and keeping the front line what it is and doing their best. So that's my opinion. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely, man. And I don't think anyone who has their head screwed on can ever actually fight back against that, to say that, hey, Ukraine, it's been almost 3 years, the best part of 3 years against Russia, who is a historically incredibly powerful country. It's been an absolute hell of a fight. And the front line is, when people say the front line's collapsing, it's relatively collapsing from a year of seeing no shifting to 30, 40 square kilometers a day. That is a relative collapse, but it's not the collapse of 30 kilometers in a day one way like we've seen in Syria. So the language used can a bit of chop and change as well.
Yeah. And I also like it kind of reminds me of Korea, the Korean War. Yeah, it's history. It's freaking 100 years ago or whatever, but if people look at the years, and how the lines have changed in Korea, it always changes. It changes based on how many American forces get in. When China invaded, we pushed them up to the Chinese border, and then they pushed us down to the very coastline at the bottom of South Korea.
Yeah.
and it ended up stagnating. And I think we're still seeing that. I mean, obviously with the ATACMS being able to be used in Russia, we see Storm Shadow, they're being able to be used. We're still seeing posturing. We're still seeing, different weapon systems coming in, and North Koreans going to Russia. We see just all sorts of different things that are happening still. And I think that there's still room for offensives on either side. But it's just going to depend on, how much funding, I guess, and all that is flooded into whatever group that they're supporting.
Yeah. You spoke about, the ideologically nationalist, driven here. Something that I've asked a few people, and I've seen other people hint on too, is, Trump has said that he will end the war within 24 hours. And, that is ticking closer to that date.
Yeah.
And I have said as well, and I've said this for a while, I've said, I don't believe that a lot of these forces are going to stop fighting regardless of what is actually potentially signed in Kyiv, in Washington, in Moscow. A lot of these guys, in protracted conflict, attritional conflict, the cost is so great. The cost on the state, the cost on the men, the cost on the machine. It's just unbelievable cost, and everyone in Ukraine has lost someone they love, has worn huge costs, and especially have got these very nationalist-driven units who have had, of course, massive losses in them too, and have fought for years. I have said before, I don't know if these units would stop fighting, and how may that look? Would you think that if something is signed, if there's agreement signed between Zelensky, Putin, and Trump, that would, at this point in time, would have to have some level of concession if the guns fall silent, because Ukraine is not in the position currently to have a demand of Crimea back.
Mm-hmm.
They need to be in a position of strength, and they need to have military objective victories to have a request of that. And that at this point in time is not the reality. It's not going to be in 5 or 6 weeks. Do you think that these units or some subunits would continue fighting regardless of what happens?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you've been to Ukraine plenty of times. I think things have changed. When I've worked alongside, or maybe not like on the front line alongside, but I've met a lot of people from Third Assault, from those sort of groups that are very highly nationalistic, and, that people might be eyeing towards, like, are you going to continue on, like, whatever. I don't think people realize at this stage in the war how professional these groups are and how well entangled they are in the Ukrainian military. Their leadership, as well as the troops, they're extremely trained. They're very, very well disciplined. They're like, and I've got friends who are in Third Assault and those sort of groups. It's like they put a huge emphasis on PT. It's very disciplined, and they're okay with the structure how it is. And I think that whatever the conflicts, whatever happens, whatever negotiations or whatever happens, I don't see groups seriously like fighting or trying to do something or start actions without the approval of their command. And their command is also very worried for their well-being as well. And they're not going to be doing like a battalion-sized defensive into somewhere, or like trying to start anything. No, I think it'll be a lot like 2014 onwards to 2022. I think a lot of groups will just be okay with what the government is telling them. They're soldiers in the army, and I think it's gonna be a little bit more. It's not so much like militia-esque anymore. It's very well disciplined with the structure. So that's my opinion. I don't see that happening.
Yeah, I just guess the cost has been so much higher. Because what I'm sort of putting into is this idea that the cost has been so high, the promise has been the return of these areas. Then, even down to the Russian officials will be in The Hague, and all of this under that peace plan put forward. And I've thought, well, there's two sides of seeing this. Is either these guys go, we're not stopping fighting and we're continuing fighting the Russians because this is what we do. And on the other side, the worst case scenario is some of these groups in command may go, we're not happy with you. Like, who are you to make the decision for us who have been fighting, and have some level of unrest as well. I guess time will show what occurs. You've got your finger on the pulse much more than I am. I'm purely observing over the top. You're literally in the trenches.
No, I think no, it's a good point. I think some things that we could see if there is like some, I've seen Zelensky, I think it was a week ago or something, say, hey, like, keeping Ukrainian statehood and keeping, we're talking about land and people. Like, to get land takes Ukrainian lives and Ukrainian blood,
Yes.
and right now it seems like he's going more towards, let's keep the blood. Let's make sure that, it'll always be part of our identity. Donbass will always be Ukraine. That's how it is. And it'll always be part of our identity if you're from there. But as long as we can keep our country together and our people alive, like, that might be better off. And, for the groups that would want to continue fighting, I'm sure that there would be opportunities for saboteurs or guerrilla fighting. I mean, there's a lot of occupied territory with a lot of people that, they're not okay with Russia being there. And I think that we could see that. And, if there are actions like saboteurs, maybe we'll see Russia then retaliate by, like, artillerying the area that's, like, kind of the we're talking about potential ceasefire, potential, like, whatever. They could do, like, artillery strikes or something. I don't think that there will ever be, like, true peace until Ukraine gets their land back. But I think that there could be actions like saboteur work and small things here and there. I think that might be the reality, but I don't think that there would be, like, big, 10,000 man, like, groups that decide to make their own militia and then do offensives. I don't really see that happening right now.
Yeah. And with your drone work, what changes have you seen between both the Ukrainian drones, the Russian drones? Have you seen much development in the past months that you've been doing this?
Yeah, well, past month, no, because I haven't been there. But the months before that, we're seeing a lot of fiber optic videos. I know my friends are very interested in that from the Russian side. Very interesting. And one thing I will say, there's we're starting to see AI capabilities possibly popping up. I don't want to get too specific, but I see AI actually coming into the forefront, maybe at the next year. And I mean, there's other things like thermal drones. I didn't realize how cheap the thermal imagery is to put on an FPV, even a kamikaze. It's like $300. It's like 300, and you can fly with a thermal camera, which still makes the drone less than $1,000, and that gives you nighttime capabilities. That's a new thing, nighttime fighting with drones, big capability that's growing. And the last thing is there's, like, mothership drones. We're seeing weird drone swarms, not like the huge ones that I would suspect that the U.S. and China are making, but small waves of them, like 5 of them at a time, like going in a row. That was a very strange thing to see even months back from the Russian side as well as Ukrainians. So yeah, drone warfare is still, like, it's still very new, and we're gonna see a lot of weird things, I think, going forward.
The drone warfare thing is terrifying. Is there any problems with availability of parts? Because I have a few friends that work in the drone industry with their fingers in all sorts of pies, and they've been saying one of the big problems with the sanctions against Russia and the sanctions against some Chinese companies to try and halt some of the drones to Russia, he's saying the problem is, where do you think these parts are that we're getting or that Ukraine is getting to build these drones? He said, because he spoke to me, he's like, it's really sort of double-edged sword of, to try and stop the drone production in Russia, you're also going to really limit the drone production going to Ukraine as well. Have you noticed any of that, the availability of parts could be a struggle or more expensive even?
No, I think we could see that in the videos as well. Like, no, we're still getting parts from everywhere in the world. It doesn't seem like if there are sanctions or if there are limitations put in place, it's not working. I don't think for either side.
Sanctions aren't working. This is new information.
But there's also something interesting I saw when I was in Taiwan a couple weeks ago. Very interesting. Obviously, China and Taiwan, they don't, there's stuff happening. There's still DJI stores and FPV stores and, like, drone part stores everywhere. You can buy them all over Taipei. If you go to Taipei, if you go to Taiwan, you can buy Chinese parts for these drones that could potentially be used in a war against China being sold. So even that individualistic from China to Taiwan, just that little strait, there's still drone parts flooding into Taiwan, despite what they're worried about probably, which is FPVs. I don't think it's very interesting for me to see. It's even in Taiwan and China, that surprised me. I was very confused about that.
Mate, it's crazy. But
Yeah.
war doesn't get in the way of good business, I guess.
Yeah.
And what's on for the next couple of months for you, man?
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna give myself a break. This is my longest time in Ukraine by far. It was like 8 or 9 months. This trip, so I'm giving myself a break. Gonna be focused on YouTube hopefully soon. I've got different things balancing. So yeah, well, we'll see. I'm kind of free floating, a lot like you. I'm able to travel a bit. I'm able to go to different places. There's reasons for it. So I'd really like to get back to Taiwan. Very interested in that country, and I think there's more to see. So I'd like to get there at some point, and definitely Ukraine again. That's my heart's definitely still in it. So yeah.
Yeah. Oh man, I really want to get to Taiwan as well. Once I sort out my health, that's where I want to go across. Because if things kick off there, whatever precedent we set, and we West has an opportunity to set a precedent in Ukraine, and I think the failure of that and how that may look to the world may actually be somewhat mirrored if Russia has a failure geopolitically in Syria of the support for the regime there. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That it can undermine security guarantees in other areas of the world. This is the biggest threat to like America, is that if Ukraine were to fall, other countries go, well, what does this piece of paper mean? Shit. And this is where I've jumped, but the equivalence could happen for other countries that have sided with Russia and go, hang on, this happened. Of course, it's not anywhere near the same amount of support. But that's the reason I've said, and a lot of people have jumped on Ukraine when there's been just discussions around nuclear weapons. And I've said, I completely understand that thinking from a smaller country with, an enemy on the doorstep. I completely understand that thinking. As an Australian, I understand that. Our largest threat is China. And if I was the leader of Australia, my first thing would be like, we need an ultimate deterrence right now. And I've said, I can't blame Ukrainian officials or other think tanks for looking at this as an option if security guarantees aren't guaranteed or aren't upheld.
Yeah, it's God. Yeah, no, it's going crazy, and we're seeing a lot happen, especially with elections in the U.S. Like, yeah, I think we're going to see, because it's a completely different administration. We see, so even like the U.S. promises to the Kurds in Syria, or the U.S. promises to Ukraine or whatever, changes every 4 years. So that's definitely a downside of democracy and that. But at the same time, yeah, I don't know. I could talk about this for a bit, but yeah, I mean, the U.S. having a different election, I think that's going to change things as well. Having a different president in town. Yeah, I think countries, especially the Kurds, are still very weary of siding with the U.S. Despite the Russians losing a lot of ground in Syria right now. I think they're still very worried about siding with the U.S. just because different administrations happen every 4 years, and this war is going to take longer than that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's that's another thing.
Oh, that is one of the problems with having like, trust me, I want to live in a capitalist democracy, but it is one of the problems is every few years you get a full change and things can change 180 degrees, and anywhere in between that too. And that is one of the bonuses of having more of like a autocratic or totalitarian regime, is that X is in power for however long until they die. And I've said this a lot about particularly Xi Jinping. And I've said, look, this guy knows he's just in power. That Trump or Biden or whatever at the time, they can only really plan a few years ahead at any point, where you don't know what somewhere like China has. They could go, well, we're setting up this so in 50 years, things are going to swing. And I've spoken to a lot of guys who work in some interesting communities who have spoken about, like, China, in particular, China's unrestricted warfare, we call it hybrid warfare, is well ahead of where we are, because the democratic process and having free media and having journalists to investigate things can actually really impact if you're trying to run an intelligence operation somewhere and have impact over a long time too. And you see the same thing with Russia backing the IRGC, or Iran through Iran IRGC. And I've been pointing at this so much, and no one cares about it. I'm like, this is important. I'm like, the Houthis down in Yemen have had significantly more success with striking ships currently. And there's a lot of ships going, well, we have to go around the bottom of Africa, and it's 9 days longer. It costs more in insurance and salaries and fuel and everything. Or if we go through the Red Sea, Suez, we still have to pay a lot more insurance now because of the threat of this. And at the same time, Russia and China are building fucking icebreakers like you wouldn't believe because of the North Sea route up over the top. And I'm like, this, we know for a fact the Belt and Road Initiative by China, which is a decade old at this point, part of that is opening up that North Sea route. And there's all these factors. And Russia, when you think Russia, you don't think they give a shit about like Greta Thunberg's green bloody future. Yet they have put in some of the most strict environmental laws ever up in the Arctic. And they got signed off. Everyone sees them. And then it comes through. It's like, well, the only country that operate nuclear icebreakers is Russia. So if you want to move through there basically any time of the year, you have to pay for transport by there. And they can shut off significantly or competing routes in other areas of the world using a proxy. And it's not that the West doesn't do hybrid warfare. It's just not as blatant in your face as this. And it does change a lot of dynamics in a lot of areas of the world.
That's really good point. You're very well said with that. It's I mean, you probably remember this from Afghanistan and pretty much everywhere in the world, especially from autocratic nations. They have like some sort of saying of some sort where they don't look at the watch. Like their watch.
We have the time.
Yeah, that one. They're looking long term. They're looking long term. Their resistance or their ambitions aren't like decade by decade. It's like it's forever. It's forever. Their ambitions, it's everything for them. For them, it's everything. And it's very different from the US, where we look at every 4 years and then we'll change and be like, oh, let's go here now, or let's do this and that. And so it's very interesting.
And war waged for the US or anyone is so expensive. To go to Afghanistan or go to here or go to there is just so unbelievably expensive.
Yeah, I mean, even they're even saying like in Afghanistan, like the reason that we left so much equipment was because it was too expensive to even get back. It's like even just the transportation costs. It's like we're okay with losing billions of dollars just because of that. It's weird, very strange.
Oh man, I think this could be a tactic in Ukraine. Could be just to make it so expensive the Russians leave. And I think that is getting more and more accepted as a tactic. Is Ukraine? I think more people are coming to the idea that Ukraine will win through Russia is becoming so expensive, verges on collapse, they'll have to withdraw, rather than some sweeping offensive works through defensive fortifications. And I think more people are looking at that. But then, of course, that comes with an extension of the war. And the Russian economy is incredibly hard to get an idea of, because it's much easier to get an idea of how a publicly traded company is actually performing than a company that's owned by the state. And you're looking at the ruble and there's all these factors. Like, to look at how Lockheed Martin is performing, you can load up the S&P and just look at it and go, oh yeah, or NASDAQ, whatever. But to look at how like Rostec or UAC is performing, well, it's impossible to do, because it's state-owned, semi-private. People claim it's completely private. It's somewhat in the middle, same as Gazprom, and it's incredibly difficult to be like, oh shit. And you see, the ruble worth less against the USD, and it looks okay, things are going poorly. And then I'll read things from economists and I go, this is actually can be a byproduct of increased cash flow. And I'm like, oh Jesus, I don't know where. Like, the predictions in this are just wild.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I'll tell you what, I'm sure that the governments, they know what they're telling up. It's probably a Venn diagram, and it's saying like, okay, what does Ukraine have? What does Russia have? Like, for the downsides of negotiations. And yeah, I mean, like, I think Kursk, there's all sorts of things that they're going to throw at the negotiating table, or whatever table you want to call it. I don't know what the correct term of it is right now, but yeah, and I think it's all going to be tallied up. The economic factors, the military factors, the trade factors, it's all gonna be tallied up, and it's gonna be dealt with when the time comes. But yeah, the longer the time goes, I think personally, I don't think Russia is gonna be very happy with that. The more time goes, I mean, the ruble's going down. It seems like they started to hide the numbers of that, and they're trying to make sure that it's not going to spiral out of control. But as well as Ukraine is losing a lot of everything. So we're gonna see what there's gonna be a lot of stuff put on the table when it's time for talks or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. And what do you make of the Kursk offensive? Because I from day one, and I know this may not be your specific wheelhouse, but from day one, I have said I don't understand the Kursk offensive with the stated goals, I should say. If the goal was to capture the major industrial area of the nuclear power plant, I understand that militarily. Politically, I may be like, oh, how may it look? But militarily, in attritional conflict, if an area doesn't have significant industrial center or like a military tactical objective, it's irrelevant to look at. And I still don't, and I've said that Kursk will either be the biggest mistake the Ukrainian forces have made or the greatest win that they've had. If I've been blind to what the goal is with that, because it's looking like Ukraine occupies somewhere around 400 to 550 square kilometers at the moment. It's incredibly difficult to get a grasp on where the border actually sits there. Like even Ukraine's own map was wrong today by like 3 kilometers, showing less than Ukraine actually occupy. Like by saying occupies back in Russia, I see to that border as being the border. So it's hard to get, but I don't understand it at this point in time. What do you make of that? And if you've spoken to anyone who's served around that area?
Yeah, no. For me, it seems like we already saw what the benefit of that is. For myself, I look at it. Okay, Ukraine goes there. Not only are they showing like the world, like, hey, look, this is what Russia's doing to us. We take part of their land, but they're also proving that Russia will not respond in a nuclear way. They're not going to respond very strong to that, either because they can't or because they won't, because some things on the dotted line between different nations are stopping them from doing what Russia really wants to do. We're seeing, I think there's a lot of things that have proved for Ukraine. I think that's one thing. And also bringing the war back home. Bringing the war to Russia, being like, hey, this is what's happening. This is what you guys are doing to us. I think it was more of a statement, and holding it, I think then is probably good for talks, when it comes to potential talks in the future. It's like, hey, like, like maybe we can get this land back, or I think it's posturing right now for a potential talk, that's personally, I think it was proving a lot.
Yeah. So I'm sort of, that's what I was sort of thinking it was going to be in the beginning, but now I'm looking at it like it tends to have jeopardized the south and the east, at least in square kilometers. And I know to look at things in kilometer squares is an unfair way of looking at war, because one area can be far more important than the other. 100 meters in one sector can be more than 10 Ks in another. But for the goals of attritional warfare, it does seem like nothing of major significance was captured in that area as far as industrial centers or vital military complexes. And it does seem that the offensive in the south and the east, that Russia didn't take the bait and push there. And my rebuttal would be, I think that Russia hasn't pushed in Kursk as hard as potentially, because I think it might actually be helping them out. I think they might go, that's great, you've got troops stuck up in here. We'll push somewhere else. And for talks, I'm a bit like, okay, I get, let's just say for the ease of mathematics, it's 500 square kilometers. I've said, look, the talks, even if it was swapped back at 5-1, if there is a negotiating there, it's still not that much. I think there may have been a lot more lofty goal in that sector, but I am still unsure. But I can see the importance that it did get Ukraine back for a period of 18 months where Ukraine had very little positive headlines. It did for a number of months get Ukraine is taking the war home. It's moving in here. It embarrassed the Russian forces in that sector. It absolutely did. So that can absolutely have a massive informational effect. But there is a trap people fall into in the doctrine of attritional war, and Rand and Rusi talk a lot about this, is that military propaganda needs to support military actions. Military actions can't be the propaganda in themselves. So you have the military action, the propaganda support that going forward. And I think that a lot of people, and this is where I believe that I'm reading Kursk wrong and that I'm going to be disproven in some way. I'm not sure. But it does seem like the military action was launched as a form of and the propaganda is not supporting the military action. Military action is the propaganda, which historically has shown to be detrimental to other areas. But I'm just not sure. I really don't know. Kursk is so interesting to me because I'm like, there's some very smart people have signed off on this somewhere. And we haven't seen a immediate withdrawal out. What I thought was going to happen, and I thought this was going to happen in Kharkiv too, is a raid. You go in, you grab people, you fuck up what you can, and you piss back off again. That's what I thought. And so far I've been incorrect on both Volchansk front, Lipsy, and back into Sudzha region for Ukraine. I thought it was going to be like a limited raid before the Russians could sort of react to it, go in 2 weeks. And because we know Russia is very slow. What did Lavrov, Minister Foreign Affairs the other day, Russian Minister of the Russians are slow to stand up. And I'm like, if you said anything that's true, it's definitely that.
Yeah, that's a good. He said that. Wow, that's interesting.
He said that about it was talking about escalation with ATACMS missiles as well.
Okay.
What is one of those things that is like, how was they, like, we have seen that this hasn't, started a nuclear war. And, this is one of the reasons I'm like, look, Trump may not be the worst thing here. Like, at the end of the day, Biden tiptoed into any amount of further arms for Ukraine. And even then, here's Zelensky saying that only very small percentages have actually been delivered of promised arms too, from a lot of countries. It's a mess, man.
Yeah, no, you made some good points, and I think another thing Kursk might be for, not to talk so much about it because I think we're on the same page because I don't know exactly, but I think it was again like proving like they could still do offensive actions, and then also by doing that they open up the idea that hey, they can sorry, my parents just got home but I won't hold it's good but I think that it also brought in the ATACMS. It proved like, hey, Russia won't stand for these dotted lines. Maybe you can give us ATACMS. Maybe you can give us some other stuff, and that might have helped out with that. The Kursk thing might have helped out with that. We'll see. We'll see.
Oh man, it's a big, slow moving cog at the moment, with other gears running off that large central cog. And I think America's slow to stand up as well at the moment. No, it's true. Well, we'll see what the next 2 months brings. I think it's definitely the most important part of the war that we've seen in a long time is the next 2 months. How do you think that the winter is actually going to affect the front? Because I've had some disagreements with some people on this. How do you see? I know your parents got home. My last question, I promise.
No, it's good.
Get to your bloody 28th birthday, mate. But how do you see winter affecting the war as Russia's on the offensive at the moment?
Yeah, no, that's I wish I was there right now to go and see it. But I've been there during winter as well. I think we're going to see more of the same, kind of more of the same that we've seen historically in wintertime in the last 3 years. I think we're going to see it bogged down a little bit. I think mechanized forces are going to have a much harder time, and Russia is certainly using mechanized forces in a lot smarter manner, by the way, more different. Like they're learning a bit, like they're going in lines with, a big turtle take in front. So I don't think those will be used as much. I think it could be bogged down a bit. Wintertime also complicates drone warfare. You got to heat up your batteries. You gotta do stuff. So everything's going to slow down a bit. I think we're gonna see that, which is actually pretty good timing for possible talks. Because Trump is going to force them to sit down, whether Ukraine or Russia wants it, possibly. So I think it's okay timing as well, and I think it'll slow down a little bit. We'll see though. Yeah.
Well, mate, is there anything else we haven't covered? Whether it's Syria, whether it's Ukraine, whether it's personal?
No, I think we covered everything. I'm really glad that we're able to talk. We came here trying to go and talk about the Syrian civil war, and I appreciate you asking questions about Ukraine as well, because it's been on my mind certainly just as much as Syria. as you know, because
Yeah.
you're also covering this stuff.
Oh, mate, I know that your channel, is more related to a lot of footage and bits and pieces, like more shorter than discussion videos like mine. But you or anyone, you're always 100% more than welcome to come on and discuss anything, whether personal to wars or whatever. At any point, if there's something on your mind, absolutely, man, come at any time. Like it's, I don't know, 3:30 in the morning for me. It's midday for you, but absolutely any time, you're more than welcome to come on and discuss anything. I'm more than ears, because I think like everyone, sort of learning as we go and seeing how this warfare looks, because we've got attritional warfare doctrine, but some of that can be sort of null and void, and maneuver warfare doctrine due to drones, which of course you're bloody balls deep in. That drones really affect the ability for these systems to operate. And there's still such a fucking underappreciation for drones. I feel like walking into the Pentagon and grabbing someone by their shoulders and being like, log on to fucking Twitter. I read this article the other day, America, and this was a official article from who was it? The head of the I forgot what we would call it, is like tri-service, so who sits over commanding between Air Force, Navy, and the Army, like very, very high-ranking senior.
Okay, yeah.
And him asking about the importance of drone warfare and saying, like, when America steps back into a war, we won't be too concerned because we will quickly gain air superiority. And I'm like, you can't assume that. And air superiority typically means about transporters and fighters and helicopters. You're not going to get that on drones. It doesn't really work like that. Like these are individual purse-fired weapons at this point. You can just have some dude. It doesn't matter what corner of the globe, whether you step into a conventional war, whether you step into a guerrilla war, you're going to have dudes wherever you are individually with drones, all as one. That assumption of that is just ridiculous. And the cost, and I've read a whole thing about Javelin and people going, Javelin, fired well over 100 grand a pop. And you've got dudes making drones on 3D printers and you at your desk screwing it together who can have the same effect on target.
Yeah. On any target as well. And I know. I'm pretty scared about what the U.S. military is doing right now, but I also have hope. I'm sure that there's a lot of stuff behind the scenes, and I'm not in the military right now. I know a couple friends who were also in Ukraine at one point that are, and it seems like they're very interested in the topic. But yeah, it's gonna be a little bit slower moving than I think what we would like to see. At least myself as an American. Yeah, I know I'm a little freaked out about it too.
Too interested in R&D, because that's where the money is. That's what I see, is the money in the military industrial complex. Well, I've had some work before. The money's in R&D and getting funded for an R&D project and a pickup of that. The problem is, this is to make drones that are worth $50,000 a pop, when it's like, no. What the boys need is $800 drones or less that they're making, that not en masse they have available, and it works. That someone can pick up and use. They can fuck around on the flight simulator on their computer. A week later, they're hitting someone in a vehicle with one. Not something that you get that a 10-year goes down, and then this, and then your company makes $5 billion and everyone's happy, and then you waste half your money in the HR department, and it's like doesn't work like that. And that can be of having a completely sort of free open market in the military, is you end up a lot of expenses on top rather than just this. And this is exactly what I say with North Korea. Everyone knows the North Korean shells are way inferior to a shell coming out of the West, but they are making like 10 to 1. And you're like, at some point in time, that a quantity is a quality of its own, and the drones are similar like this as well.
Yeah. No, I know. And whenever I see like videos, I'm seeing videos from like people, drone manufacturers trying to get like big DoD contracts and stuff, and they're putting it on YouTube, and they're like showing off their drone. It makes me cringe just as much as you. I'm like, oh, what are you doing? $20K a drone? Like that's what you're gonna do. It's got AI. It's got this special like inertial nav. Bro, like it's not. No, like that's not gonna be working. You need like tons of that stuff. You need tons, and you could like. I'll take 20 FPVs rather than like this one drone that I like will hit a target. Yeah, it makes me very scared, but I'm sure that they're working through something. And also the US budget is quite a bit bigger than other budgets in other military. So might be able to pull it off. Might be able to pull it off. We'll see.
Yeah, you trim the fat off that budget and half it's going into just useless shit. I say that when I was in the military. I said if the taxpayer knew how much money gets wasted, people would crack the shits. And I also said, if this was a business, it would have gone under a long time ago.
Yeah. I mean, we saw a little bit less of it in the Marine Corps, but it was still like, it was. I know what's happening behind those curtains in the H&S department. Like, I see what's going on.
Well, mate, this is Civ Div, mate. Look, keep doing what you're doing. You do a fantastic job, and people really resonate with yourself, and that is it's more so than the footage you post or anything. People resonate with who you are, and I think that's a testament to your character and who you are. And I know me and everyone here wishes you a happy 28th birthday as well.
Thank you a lot, man. I'm officially what?
Late 20s. You can't claim you're in your mid-20s anymore.
Yeah, I am, aren't I? Yeah, no, 28 is a little too big for me, man. It's starting to worry me. I'm like, what am I doing with my life? But yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
I really appreciate you having me on, dude. Really appreciate it. It's been nice talking to you.
Mate, it's an open invite. Absolutely anytime for you, anyone else. Happy days, bro. Happy days.
Thank you.
Easy, mate. Well, you look after yourself. And I'll speak to you real soon. Well, I'll message you anyway.
Yeah, sounds good, dude.
Happy birthday, bro. Yeah, see
Thank you.